So the first motivator for manipulation that I want to talk about is overzealousness. Overzealousness is what you get when you combine idealism with certainty and urgency. When I know that I'm right, and I know that you're trying to destroy the world or that you're going to do serious damage, and it's a problem that's happening right now, I might be tempted to use less than fair means to defeat your evil agenda. So that's overzealousness. That is one of the things that motivates manipulative media. I've been part of it. I think you've seen a little bit of that in my old stories. I want to tell now a story about the time when I was finally able to recognize that that was not where I wanted to be. So it was December 2004, and I was leading up the Canadian arm of an international pro-family lobby. Our efforts in Canada were particularly focused on preserving the one man, one woman definition of marriage. Our perspective on that was quite different from most of the people that were also working on it in the pro-family movement at the time. Our perspective was that marriage was the only institution that preserved for children the right to a mother and a father. And we wanted to preserve that institution in a form where it was capable to continue to guarantee that to children. There was a lot of anti-gay sentiment at the time. Our position was that all of the invective and persecution of gays needed to stop. That was a fundamental thing that needed to be addressed, but that the institution of marriage was not the mechanism for doing so. But we needed to find an alternate mechanism that didn't disenfranchise children of their fundamental right to a mother and a father. That was our argument. But we differed from many others who were approaching the topic from a different perspective. And we even differed from our parent organization in the US. So late December 2004, the Liberal government gave notice in Canada that they were going to introduce a bill to redefine marriage as the union of any two persons. I received by email an action alert that I was expected to send out to the thousands of people on our list. I read the action alert and it was angry. If I recall correctly, it was talking about how the Liberal government was breaking faith with voters, and it was trying to leverage the outrage of citizens to have them respond, contact their members of parliament, start to lobby to try and defeat the bill. Well, I looked at the action alert and there was no way that I was going to sign my name to it. It was angry, and I felt like it was unfair. Because of the experience that I talked about in the last lesson, where I went down to the CRTC and I saw the letters of hatred towards gays, I felt that that probably the Liberal government's effort to alter the definition of marriage was actually being made in good faith. I believe the government was trying to resolve a very real problem, but in a way that put an institution that was essential to the well-being of children at risk. And so I wasn't willing to sign an action alert that portrayed them as villains. When I explained this to the US strategist that had written the action alert, he patiently explained to me that that's not the way that you do activism. He explained to me that what you have to do with an action alert is, first of all, you educate people, and then you make them angry. Once you have them angry, you have them motivated to action, and so then you give them something that they can do with their anger. Sign this petition, contact your MP, something like that. But in order to motivate action, you had to get people angry. Well, I had too much experience with the impact of anger in my own self. and determined we weren't going to do that. The strategist and I could not come to an agreement about what should be done with that action alert. So we took it to the steering committee, and I am going to share with you the arguments that I made that helped the steering committee decide that we would go with a calm and reasoned action alert instead of one that came out trying to get people mad. So everybody on the steering committee happened to be a person of faith. And so I was able to talk with them quite frankly about some of these issues, particularly the spiritual reasons. I talked about how I felt that contention is spiritually dangerous. That when I was writing for BC Alberta Western Report, one of my major assignments was to cover the anti-family movement, and I began to feel a simmering enmity toward the people who were fighting against the family. Then as I studied scripture, I became strongly aware of times when people became so angry at those who were doing evil that they themselves became unrighteous. I write that the clear message to me was that when the righteous give themselves over to contend with anger against the wicked, even the very, very wicked, they open a wedge for the adversary to have place in their own hearts. It's not a long trip from there to becoming his servants. I said in response to that prompting, I started making an effort at seeing my philosophical opponents as children of God, beloved of Him. I soon found that I felt a kinship with many, not all, of them. I felt that most of the radical feminists and the homosexuals I interviewed were actually sincere people who wanted to make a better world. I believe that when we engage in contention, we lose our way, we lose the convincing power of the Spirit of God. I still get lost in it myself sometimes, but it hurts me when I do. I am trying to consciously and actively avoid it. Then philosophically, leveraging anger is counterproductive. When we assume that the other guy is bad, our actions most often invite him to react badly. If he meets our demands, he doesn't get credit for it, but appears weak. If he thumbs his nose at us, we get more angry and punish him, but at least he's asserted his independence. It's a no-win position. I think we all admire Abraham Lincoln. One of the great things about him was that he appealed to the better angel in his listeners. I believe that was a large part of what made him effective. Strategic. I think that motivating with anger risks alienating the people who would be our best supporters. Unless we constantly hold the people who do support us by the hand, we make them ineffective lobbyists because the MPs they petition see them as reactionaries or radical right-wingers. It's not a constituency many politicians want to be identified with, at least in Canada, and neither does the general public want to be identified with it either. I learned something of this when I did an article on public input into whether the CRTC should ban discriminatory language. I already told you about that in the last semester. The last lesson. Next, for the good of society. I believe that one of the driving forces behind gay marriage is the gay bashing to which homosexuals are still subject. People sympathize with gays' desire for validation because gays are still the victims of invective and even violence. When we leverage anger and take a position that is dismissive toward gay concerns, we add fuel to the underlying problem that gives the momentum. We add fuel to the underlying problem that gives the movement its momentum. I believe that every radical movement rides piggyback on a just cause. When you redress the underlying injustice, you cripple the movement. When you reinforce the injustice, you may enjoy a temporary victory, but you also entrench the movement and sow the seeds of your ultimate defeat. And finally, I made an appeal for us to motivate with loving concern for something good instead of trying to fight against something and demonize people who were really trying to make the world a better place. Turned out that the steering committee agreed, and that is the action alert that we sent out was a moderate, calm, and reasoned action alert that actually gained a lot of support from the people that we would send our messages to. The whole purpose of that story is to make clear that It's easy when you're sure that you're right and you're sure that somebody else is doing something that is harmful. It is easy to not play fair. It's easy to resort to manipulative mechanisms like appeal to emotion, anger, as is the case for most activism today.